and it's talking about Brock Purdy and Matt Campbell and the USC job. So basically, the lowdown on this is Brock Purdy went on a very famous, very well-known podcast like last week, I believe. It's called the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Former NFLers Taylor Lewan and Will Compton are the hosts. It's actually wildly entertaining. I'd recommend. It's really fun. Not to send you to a podcast outside of the VOCFB network because we obviously have the best, but it's in terms of competitors, it's a close second, I would say. But so really entertaining podcast. They have Brock Purdy on because he's, I think the show's based in Tennessee. He works out in Nashville now because that's where he lives in the off season. And, there was some big stories that came out of that, but there was this one story that kind of went under the radar, which was Brock talking about his last year at Iowa State and just kind of one of the last conversations he had with Matt Campbell. And he basically revealed that Matt Campbell had an offer on the table from USC before they hired Lincoln Riley. And it was obviously a lot of money because it made Matt Campbell, really seriously consider leaving Iowa State. So probably somewhere in the Lincoln Riley range. I wouldn't guess that it was the same number as Lincoln Riley because you have to really, impress Lincoln Riley to get him to leave the situation he was in at Oklahoma. So I'd assume a little bit less, but, still in the ballpark, it seems like from what Brock was saying. And I'll just read some of the quotes from the stories. They're pretty interesting. Here Brock says, my senior year, I was leaving. I was out the door, met with him after my senior night, and he was crying pretty hard. You could tell there was something going on. He was going to leave, that kind of thing. Met with him the next day, and I think USC offered him something legit before Lincoln Riley. When they offered him some stuff, he was deciding on whether to go. He's from Ohio. He's a Midwest guy. I actually brought my dad with me the next day when I met with him, and we talked. I was like, dude, my dad was in my life. He coached me up. He was talking about out in LA, it's just a different world compared to the Midwest where he's used to and being in his kid's life and stuff. It would just be a different kind of environment, not knocking USC, California, anything. It's just different. And then Brock kind of reveals that after that whole conversation, Matt Campbell was kind of more sure that he was going to stay at Iowa State. And then, he said, I'm not saying that I was the determining factor in that, but I think I just gave him a little perspective on being a father, what matters, raising your kids. He could do that at Iowa State. So super interesting story. A couple of different thread lines to go on here. I mean, the whole raising your kids, whether it's comfortable for a coach to play in LA, that's definitely one. But then, of course, I think the program would look a whole lot different if we had Matt Campbell as our head coach. So take any of those trains of thought that you want, Matt. But I think there's a lot to unpack here for sure.
Man, where do we start? First off, there's that advertisement on the show on the screen grab. I don't know if anybody else recognizes that person. That's Steve McQueen, really famous movie star, like a giant movie star. There he is, back. His face, it kind of pops up and then disappears briefly. Steve McQueen was, as big as it gets for movie stars in the late 1960s, car chases, movie Bullet. I bring it up because, Steve McQueen is Hollywood glamour. He is, L.A., Southern California royalty, purely in terms of the entertainment industry. So we're reading this story about this Matt Campbell, wholesome Midwest slant and how California is different. So couldn't help but noticing that. But the other thing is, where does Brock Purdy play NFL football? The California coast, the exact so different from the Midwest, and he's thriving there, of course. He led the 49ers to a Super Bowl. So there's just so many, just the backstories, first of all, before we get into the actual discussion about USC, kind of hilarious there. So Ethan, I think really, in terms of the juicy elements of this story, and of course it's juicy to a certain obvious extent just because you have Brock Purdy talking about how, hey, Matt Campbell was emotional and USC offered him something legit. And of course, as we remember, as we go back to 2021, Thanksgiving weekend, I remember on Thanksgiving Friday, John Wilner was saying, and he wasn't inaccurate, I don't think, that, stuff was happening. I remember John Wilner, this is getting intense, the courtship between USC and Matt Campbell. It didn't mean anything was done, but that things were heating up. And, so Iowa State played a game on Thanksgiving Friday afternoon. And if we just stop for a moment and consider why that's significant is just that Iowa State's regular season was going to end on Friday afternoon before Saturday. So USC would have been able to then step in, presumably, and interview Matt Campbell, initiate that process to bring him aboard. And let's remember, when Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team in 2021 lost to Oklahoma State on Saturday night, so one day later, one day after Iowa State and Matt Campbell played their regular season finale, because Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team with Caleb Williams lost, Oklahoma did not make that season's Big 12 championship game. It was Oklahoma State against Dave Aranda and Baylor for the championship game. So because this is a well-documented part of the Lincoln Riley hire at USC, because Oklahoma did not qualify for the Big 12 championship game, that meant OU's regular season was over, and Mike Bohn and Brandon Sosna were able to then, court him through the night into the morning. And Brandon Sosna, has said, like, we were praying for Oklahoma State to win that game, so that Oklahoma would not make the Big 12 title game, and that would free up Lincoln Riley on the open market that much earlier. So all of those details with Iowa State playing Friday, that gave Matt Campbell a leg up on Lincoln Riley, if we presume that like those were the top two candidates on USC's big board. Matt Campbell's season ended Friday. We didn't know for sure if Oklahoma's season was going to end a day later on Saturday. It did. But it's just fascinating to go through all the minute details of that Thanksgiving weekend from 2021. Ethan, my first question for you would be, it's obviously something that USC fans would be interested in. But, let's just go through the hypothetical that Matt Campbell does take the USC job. Would USC be better off right now? Compared to what we've seen under Lincoln Riley. And obviously there are a lot of what ifs to consider, a lot of hoops to jump through. One is just, how would the rest of that 2021 coaching carousel have played out differently if Matt Campbell goes to USC? Like, where would Lincoln Riley have gone? Would he have stayed at Oklahoma? Would he have gone to LSU? And if he goes to LSU, does Brian Kelly stay at Notre Dame? Like, all those dominoes. But we've also seen coaching careers unfold in the 4 years since then, and it's a really interesting thought exercise. We're not here to condemn anybody, but in terms of, just which programs actually would have been better off if A had happened instead of B. So let's apply that to USC. Would USC be better off, in your estimation, if Matt Campbell and not Lincoln Riley got the job?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. I think, first of all, and I think everyone's going to agree with me on this, if Matt Campbell gets hired, 2022 just doesn't happen. Like, that season as constructed, there's just no way anything remotely close to that happens. Like, if you hire Matt Campbell and, the quick roster turnover just doesn't happen, you're just hoping to be above 500 that season, I think. And that would have been considered USC fans are never satisfied with anything other than competing for at least a conference championship. But I think, in a hindsight is 2020 type of thing, first season under Matt Campbell, just, going 7-5 or 8-5 with the bowl win or something like that would have been a rousing success. I think there's an argument that a season like last season may have been a little bit better. And, maybe we have more of an upward trajectory than like a great first season, and then we regress for 2 seasons, and then now it seems to be on the upswing again. I mean, obviously, if Matt Campbell is the head coach, you're not going to have Alex Grinch is a defensive coordinator, so maybe the defense isn't set back as much like it was those first couple of years. I mean, if you look directly at what Matt Campbell's done the past few years at Iowa State, I mean, there's a compelling argument that USC would be in a decent place when it comes to like Iowa State was basically in the position last year that USC was in 2022, which is, you know, in the title game and one blowout away from making the college football playoff. I mean, it's a different world nowadays, obviously, with 12 teams being able to make the playoff, and Iowa State had a lot easier path to the playoff than USC did in 2022. But it is like effectively the same situation. They were, you know, heading into that day before they knew that they were going to get blown out by, you know, over 20 points. They were a win away from the college football playoff. And there was, you know, times during the season where I think they were ranked as high as 7 or 9 in the AP poll, I remember. And like there were times in the season where people thought they would be the Big 12 representative. It was BYU for a while, it was them for a while, and then ultimately Arizona State just kind of came out of nowhere and snatched it up at the end. So with you know, considering that, there's been somewhat of an upward trajectory. I mean, Rocco Becht is a great quarterback. Maybe you would assume that Matt Campbell still gets Rocco Becht to come out to LA just because USC has all the resources. Plus, you know, the relationship with Matt Campbell would still kind of endure. Rocco Becht is a pretty good quarterback. Is he better than Jaden Maiava this year? I'm not sure. I mean, Jaden Maiava is really raw and promising. I think Rocco Becht is a safer pick to be better this year, but I think Maiava could be better. So I don't know. I think the 3 years would have been similar. I don't know if they play out in the same order. I think we, at some point under Matt Campbell, would have had the kind of year that, or at least similar to the kind of year that Lincoln Riley had in 2022. But I don't think that would have been the first year. You know, maybe the second year of, and again, it's just so hard to estimate because we don't know what quarterback we would have had. Caleb Williams was such a difference maker. He's obviously not coming if Matt Campbell's the coach. But yeah, I mean, I think we'd be in a similar spot. I don't know, but I think our outlook as a program right now is still better than Iowa State's. So I think Iowa State is projected to finish something like 4th in the Big 12, and the Big 12 is like, it's an all right conference, but it's not, you know, USC would compete for a Big 12 championship today if you put them in the Big 12. So it's not, you know, it's not the Big 12 it used to be, at least. But I think the last 3 years, like I said, would have been similar. I still am picking Lincoln Riley moving forward, though, just because of how the recruiting classes come together and how, just kind of how the outlook is. And the moves that he's made more recently have been encouraging in terms of getting guys in the building like Danton Lynn and all those guys. So.
And that really is the fascinating part of this, isn't it? Is that, you know, it took Lincoln Riley a long time. And one could say it took Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen a long time. And that brings up a point that, you know, Lincoln Riley hired by Mike Bohn, then, you know, Mike Bohn gets dismissed and Jen Cohen steps in. We have to ask, would Jen Cohen be USC's athletic director if Matt Campbell was the head coach? You know, you would think, right, that Jen Cohen, you know, she came aboard in August of or the summer of 2023. I think it was August. You know, she had to think, well, I'm stepping into, you know, a Cadillac job, and I've got Lincoln Riley with Caleb Williams coming back after his Heisman season. Like, you know, this is a job just set up to succeed. I mean, we can't get in someone else's mind for certain, but you have to think that's part of the allure of the USC job, not just in general, but the timing of it, right? That Jen Cohen had to think the timing was right for her to leave UW up in Seattle and go down to Southern California. I'm sure a part of her thought that this is a job made for me to succeed. Like, I shouldn't have to be worrying about coordinator firings. I shouldn't have to worry about, you know, our recruiting, our NIL, any of that. And she got an education. And then she got an education because Lincoln Riley kept Alex Grinch. The 2023 season goes off the rails. And then Jen Cohen was, you know, thrust into a kind of situation I'm sure she did not expect. So, Ethan, if Matt Campbell takes the USC job, do you think Jen Cohen goes for the USC job? And like that's just the great unknown, because who would have been the AD if Jen Cohen wasn't? I don't know if you followed the summer or the AD search once Mike Bones left. Like, I didn't follow that search very closely. Any perspective on that piece of this puzzle?
Oh, another tough question, Matt. I think it's harder to convince Jen Cohen because, like you said, I mean, Lincoln Riley in 2020 and the 2022 season created like reverberating benefits beyond just the 2022 season. I mean, like you said, kept some guys around, got some transfers in. That wouldn't have come if, they didn't think that they were coming to play for a national contender immediately. I think even the 2023 season they were just so good. Not so good, but they were good enough offensively, and it was so clear that the defense was so bad that, someone like Danton Lynn is willing to come to USC because he knows that, they're a defense away from being a really good powerhouse football team. Or they were, at least in 2023. And then, obviously you take a hit when someone like Caleb Williams leaves, but the offense was still, it was a more balanced team last year, even though it took, the offense took a step back and the defense took a step forward. It was still a more balanced team overall. I think Lincoln Riley also just comes with the name value. He comes with the reputation. Matt Campbell has been a very successful football coach. I don't think, comes with the same name value and recognition that Lincoln Riley does, especially like in recent history. The idea of working with Lincoln Riley in 2023 was like, Lincoln Riley was one of the hottest coaches in football. You would have been floored to work with Lincoln Riley. Matt Campbell, it's like, oh, I love Matt Campbell. I respect Matt Campbell. It's kind of a more humble Midwest opinion. You work at a humble Midwest program, you kind of get humble Midwest opinions on you also from outside perspectives. Like, I don't think Matt Campbell has any giant haters anywhere except for, maybe the fans of the NFL teams that he had stops at, possibly. But I just think, the same thing too. I don't think anybody's super fired up about Matt Campbell. I don't think if Matt Campbell gets hired by USC, the fans are super fired up either. I think, especially coming off of the disappointment that was Clay Helton, I think people are just kind of like, could have been worse, could have like rehired Dante Williams or something, and stuck with him, but it's not Lincoln Riley or any of those other top guys that USC was wanting. So I just think it's harder. But I think USC in 2023 was still, and even if they have kind of a ho-hum season, if 2022 was at least better than 2021, which it would have been hard for it to have been worse, it was at least like, a decent bit better than 2021. And you just are able to see opportunity as, I think Jen Cohen is someone who sees USC as a land of opportunity, regardless of who the head football coach is, just because of all the NIL opportunities here. It's a great school academically. There's just so many resources at your disposal for making these athletic programs good. And obviously Jen Cohen's not just concerned with the football program either. So, and, other programs were on the rise at that time as well, in terms of the women's basketball program. The men's basketball program had a lot of hype, kind of, fizzled out after, the last couple of years, but they still had a lot of hype around them. People thought they were going to be great. So I think I see it as more likely that she still gets hired, or someone of her caliber at least, just because of the great opportunity that exists at USC. I do think it's harder though, for sure. It's a harder